Good afternoon and welcome to Day 9 of the 2021 Milwaukee Film Festival, presented by Associated Bank. I'm Dante McFadden, the Black Lens programmer at Milwaukee Film. And when I'm not working with Milwaukee Film, I work as the director of the McNair Scholars Program with the Educational Opportunity Program at Marquette University. I am part of a collective of faculty, staff, and students at the campus called the Marquette Forum. And we are the sponsors for today's conversation on the excellent documentary film, Who We Are, A Chronicle of Racism in America. It will feature Jeffery Robinson, the central figure of this documentary, and filmmakers Ivelia Guerrero and Sarah Kunstler. They will talk with current student leaders at Marquette, Brianna Flowers, Ivelia Guerrero, and Sir Lawrence Tinder, who are also part of the Educational Opportunity Program. Before we get started with this conversation, a few pieces of housekeeping. As you've seen, we have a Double Up Challenge happening. So thank you to the generosity of Susan and Bob Mickelay. If we raise $50,000, not $5,000, $50,000 during the festival, they will double it. Text double up, DOUBLEUP to 44321, or go to mkefilm.org/donate to donate, or go to mkefilm.org/members to become a member and help us meet our goal. And speaking of members, Milwaukee Film, especially during these times where we're all virtual and we're still in the midst of a pandemic, we couldn't do what we do without our members. So thank you so much for your support. And members get access to free films throughout the year, discounts on tickets, passes, and more. Plus, our members keep the nonprofit Milwaukee Film going. If you think that sounds appealing, please join us. If you're already a member, thank you, and please help us spread the word. To see our full slate of films and events, you can go to mkefilm.org/MFF. And remember, wherever you're watching this panel, drop your questions and comments in the chat or in the comments section, and we'll pull them into our conversation. In addition to following Milwaukee Film, make sure you follow Black Lens on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So I want to go ahead and get started. So I would like to call forth our panelists for this afternoon. And while I leave the screen, they are going to go ahead and introduce themselves and share what information they would like to share about themselves. And I just want to say, it is truly an honor to have Jeffery Robinson and Ivelia Guerrero and Sarah Kunstler to talk about their amazing film. And it's an honor to have Brianna, Ivelia, and Sir Lawrence to represent Marquette University and to talk about your experience as student leaders. It really means a lot to have you all here. So I will exit and let you continue with the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. McFadden. It's an honor to be here as an EOP SSS student. You know, it's just amazing to see so much excellence we were able to pull off this year. Just being here is a part of that. My name is Brianna. I go by Bree. I'm from the city of Milwaukee. I was raised on the north side. I went to Destiny High School, which I feel like is the best high school in the world. And, you know, I'm a senior. I'll be graduating next week, I believe, from Marquette University studying political science.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm so excited. Thank you all for having me. My name's Ivelia Guerrero. I'm a senior in the College of Nursing, so I'll be graduating next week too. I'm from Burlington, Wisconsin, which is about an hour south of Milwaukee, so not too far. I'm a first-gen college student, also part of Educational Opportunity Program, the Student Support Services Program, part of the Burke Scholars Program as well. And I just wrapped up my term as student body president here at Marquette. It was a very exciting year. The first Latina to take on the role. It was a great honor, lots of challenges, but also lots of highs. And so under my term, we really concentrated on creating a campus that was receptive to equity and justice. And we led several initiatives surrounding racial justice, mental health, and community engagement. So happy to be here.
I'm Ivelia Guerrero. I'm one of the two directors, along with my sister, of Who We Are, A Chronicle of Racism in America. We're so excited to be part of this film festival this year and part of this dialogue in particular. We founded a production company called Off Center Media in 2000, and we primarily make advocacy videos for people in prison.
And I am Sarah Kunstler, and I am lucky to be Emily's sister. If I didn't have her partnership in this, I definitely wouldn't be here because she is a force and a motivator. And I am a filmmaker with Off Center Media, and I'm also a criminal defense lawyer.
And good evening, folks. My name is Jeff Robinson. I am a 1978 Marquette graduate. I spent 34 years as a criminal defense lawyer, and for the last 6 years, I've been one of 3 deputy legal directors at the National ACLU Legal Department. And in April of this year, one of my longtime colleagues, a woman named Andrea Crabtree, who worked with me as a criminal defense lawyer and then worked with me at the ACLU. She and I left the ACLU to form the Who We Are project, and I am thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Bini Gigi, my name is Lawrence Cinder. I am African American and Native American here on traditional Ho-Chunk and Potawatomi and many of my relatives' land in Wisconsin. It is an honor and a privilege being Dr. McFadden's student, being here to talk and have a conversation with Dr. Robertson. I think today is going to be a great day, good energy and great questions. And I just can't wait to get into it. A little bit about me is I'm born and raised here in the 53206 zip code. So Wisconsin and Milwaukee, poor zip code, a lot of policing, mass incarceration for Black males and females, and just a lot of resources not being provided for people like me. And today is a great conversation piece. So thank you.
So Sarah and Emily and I will just wait for a question from any of you and we'll get started.
Sorry, I was muted. I keep forgetting that you have to always mute yourself. But a lot of the work that we do on campus is surrounding, racial equity. And we're all EOP students, so our scholarship is funded through, the movement. It's funded through people sacrificing time and effort and, resources in their health. We also have been doing that too for other students. But, one of the things that I wanted to ask is, how did you find, the motivation to get through this film, even creating it? Because just watching it, I felt like so many emotions, very, very overwhelming emotions, and I had to pause it sometimes and kind of take a break and come back just because of the amount of, I really don't even have the word for it, the amount of pain really that was put onto screen. How did you get through that?
Brianna, I guess I got through it the way our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents got through it. It's one thing to tell the story of it, and it's another thing to live it and live through it. And so I was born in 1956 in Memphis, Tennessee. And some of the first stories I remember my parents telling me were about the Montgomery Bus Boycotts and what people did and what they sacrificed in order to make changes. And so there's a responsibility that I feel to tell like the story of my parents and my grandparents and their communities and what they went through. And one thing I always tell myself is that if they could live through it, then I can talk about it. Having said that, there are days when this would paralyze me. And there are times when I would just have to walk away and be with myself. And Sarah and Emily will be able to tell you that driving around the country, filming and interviewing the people we interviewed, I think we spent 4 days in Alabama, and we flew into Atlanta and then drove into Birmingham, Selma, multiple places in Alabama. And as we were driving back to the Atlanta airport, I can't remember 10 words being said in that van. Everyone was just stunned. But I think we also felt that we were privileged to be able to bring some of this to the screen, because in my view, this is one of the most important things that has to happen in America. If we don't reckon with this history, then where we're headed is a place I have no desire to go.
Emily and I are white, so we're the beneficiaries of a racist system and a racist power structure. And, you know, we don't experience the racism in the film that the people we interviewed in our film experience. But we heard Jeffery speak for the first time in 2017, and what his talk really brought home for us is that this is our history, that the history of racism in America, the history of anti-Black racism in America, is white history as much as it is Black history, even more so in that it's white perpetrators and white supremacy, and a story of Black oppression and Black resistance, and that it's important for all Americans to learn this history and take ownership of this history. And so that's why we got involved. To hear Jeffery talk for me, for Emily, was to be forever changed. It made it impossible for us to look at any aspect of our world in the same way. And we wanted to help share that. And so that's why we're here.
Thank you all for that.
Yeah, I can ask the next question. And just a small comment too. And also, sorry everyone, I have a little doggo back there going to be barking a little bit throughout the meeting.
The dog has views too, that's all right.
All right. For me personally, this video touched a lot of layers to who I am and where I'm at in 2021 as a biracial, but more of a Black male and a Native male living experience that I carry in this world. And it's just interesting to know, again, the past, because we look in the past to, you know, change our futures. A lot of great quotes in this film. And so that's what I pretty much did as a student leader on campus with the help of Bree and many organizations on campus, is to reconcile our past of going to administration, being able to have these tough conversations to a white audience. You know, when we look at Marquette, we see Marquette as a PWI, a predominantly white institution, where it carries 72 white population, and the 30% is divided in different layers and intersectionalities. And so my question is, related to Bree, how did you navigate in those spaces of who you are as a person in today's time? And please do excuse me about the time frame of the film, but you know, being able to go into centuries or, you know, even years of decades of having those roots, and then, you know, elders passing away and people who had those oral knowledge being able to add to the conversation. How did you guys and the team being able to navigate those rough patches in those good spaces?
I guess I will start by saying, and Lawrence, I want to make sure I'm going to answer your question in terms of navigating white spaces for me. That's something that I think my family made a decision on very soon after I was born. My parents were at the forefront of the fight for integration and African-American rights locally in Memphis. And in 1963, my older brother and I integrated a Catholic school in Memphis, Tennessee. We were the only 2 Black kids in that entire school, 1st grade through 8th grade. And my parents prepared us for that. They told us, when you go to school, there are going to be people that are looking for you to fail. Anything you do, they're going to blow out of proportion. And, you know, I was 6 years old and they were having this conversation with me, but at the same time, they were telling us, you are the most handsome, most brilliant, most capable kids we have ever seen in our lives. And of course, that wasn't true, but if they tell it to you enough, you start to believe it. And so my parents just kept emphasizing how we could do anything. And as one of the segments of the film showed, especially when you're 6 years old, even when there is racism flowing all around you, 6-year-olds don't understand that crap. And, you know, a kid that became one of my best friends for all of my school years was a white Irish Catholic kid who liked me because I climbed to the top of the monkey bars where he was. And, you know, and so navigating these white spaces, you know, I think all of us have done it. You've done it because you're from Wisconsin. So you've had to do it. And I think, you know, there are times when you're asking yourself, should I speak up about this? Or do I let it lay because I'm the only one here? Or how do I handle this? And I think I have gained more strength as I've gone through my life in feeling like the issue related to my race, my community, my family is important enough to me that I'm going to talk about it. And I hope people will hear me. I'm not going to yell and scream at anybody, but I am going to tell the truth. And if you don't want to talk to me, then, you know, you can move on. So in terms of the navigating the white spaces, I think I've just tried to be myself as much as I can. And I think the support I've had from my family and my community has really helped me do that.
And this is Jeff's film and Jeff's talk. We may be credited as directors, but we were really along for the ride. Jeff conducted all the interviews in this film. We were granted trust and access to people's homes and stories because of the trust and confidence they had in Jeff. And many of the people who we interviewed had seen Jeff's presentation. We would first invite them to the presentation because especially when there was some hesitancy within the community, they didn't know who we were, who Jeff was, what our intentions were, and whether they wanted to trust us with their stories. And after they would see Jeff speak and come to the presentation, the next day, you know, they would call and say, you know, this is great. We really are on board with this. We really want to, we really see eye to eye with you guys and Jeff, and we would be able to sit down and get these interviews.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can jump in. Dr. Robinson, I wanted to pivot a little bit and pick your brain on maybe some time that you had at Marquette. I was watching the film and there was something that paralleled between the film and us as student leaders here. So I'll give a ton of context and then I'll actually ask the question. So we early in the film, you're interviewing Gwen Carr, Eric Garner's mother, and she speaks about the murder of her son as using it or looking at it as a sacrificial lamb. That's the term that she used, and how the hope is that we see this and we move forward and it doesn't happen again. There's change that happens. There's equity that occurs. And what I saw that in Sir Lawrence and Brianna, you can probably agree, is that here at Marquette, we've had a series of racist incidents since before times. And I know that in our past 4 years, we've seen a lot. And, you know, each time that one of those things happens, we think maybe this is our sacrificial lamb. Maybe after this, it will stop, it will change. And it's unfortunate to say that, well, we've had some progress at our university. We continue to have these incidents. We continue to have racist students be vocal on our campus. So we wanted to pick your brain on what student leadership looked like when you were at Marquette, how some of those racial tensions functioned at the school when you were here, and if maybe that's changed at all.
I think, you know, I am not, other than what y'all are telling me, I'm not that familiar with what's happening on Marquette campus today, although the report that you just gave is distressing. I was at Marquette from 1974 to 1978. The thing that was the biggest factor in bringing Black and white students together at that time was Al McGuire and the basketball team. there were definite divisions along racial lines at Marquette in the 70s. And the N-word was something I heard on a regular basis going around campus. And I'm not saying that that's worse than anything you're hearing today, because taking out the N-word and substituting something that is its equivalent but doesn't have that ugly history is still saying the exact same thing. I will say this. I've only been in your presence, the three of you in your presence for a few minutes, but we didn't have anybody on campus that had the courage that y'all have. And I include myself in that, because I wasn't doing what y'all are doing. I wasn't speaking up in the ways that y'all are speaking up. And that's one of the things that I want to say in terms of what has changed. And, you know, are we going backward or are we going forward? Number one of the reasons that I'm so joyous to be here is that I'm just looking at the three of you, and y'all are so far more advanced on these issues than I was at the same time. And as I turned 65 in August, and one of the things I'm looking at is who's coming next. And I'm looking at y'all, and it makes me feel really peaceful about who's coming next. This is a long game. This is not a short game. And this is not a game where you're going to win and then you can relax and everything will keep going forward, because it will slip back just as quickly as it moved 2 steps forward. It will fall 5 steps backward, just like that. And so the fact that y'all are still dealing with some of the same things that I was dealing with in 1974 to 1978 doesn't surprise me at all. But where there is progress is the response, and how y'all are dealing with it and how the campus is dealing with it. And I guarantee you, y'all have Marquette at a radically different place than it was in the 70s. And I'm hoping that the sophomores and juniors that are coming after y'all are looking at y'all and not saying, I want to be like them, but looking at y'all and saying, I'm going to do better than them. So in some words, I guess I would sum it up: meet the new boss, same as the old boss. It doesn't surprise me that you're still going through it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely a lot has changed, and we've seen progress, but I think we can all attest that it's frustrating when it's not moving quickly as quickly as we wish. So thank you. Definitely does provide hope, and I think we have a lot of expectations for our underclassmen too moving forward.
Excellent.
Yeah, that was a lot, honestly. We've been going through a lot at Marquette. We've been fighting too, and I know, like they said, with progress comes struggle. So we've been progressing, but we also been struggling. But it's just stuff like this just kind of, helps ease some of the tension. One of the things that really stood out to me, one of the reasons I say I have to pause the film sometimes, is when you went to I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the tree, but where like lynchings took place and you touched the tree, and I was like, that to me is, like, because we all know trees basically stand until you cut it down. Like, trees gonna live forever, and just knowing that, it was just a lot for me to even sorry, I don't know why we're getting emails right now, but it was tough. And then also seeing I think you said the film said that one of the survivors from the Tulsa massacre was, and I was like, it's not that far. He's just generationally tied, not far away. I
She's
always
still
tell
alive.
people, yeah, like, to me, I always say, like, I'm a first generation college student, second generation full integration, and fourth generation of freedom in my family. And people think about the longevity of life, like that is still there. Like, all that stuff and all those sentiments still carry within us today. And just kind of being in the fight, being in the movement, we've held countless protests, well, 3 sit-ins outside. I don't know how many those were, but just being and doing the same stuff that we were seeing, it kind of creates this idea of pessimism in my mind. Like I get pessimistic sometimes thinking about it. But I'm wondering for you, how did you navigate those bad thoughts and keep them from, stopping you during the movie? Because even in the beginning, I think one of the first interviews, you were kind of like, I can't keep talking to this guy because he just doesn't want to get it. So how did you navigate that?
I want to talk about that for sure, and I'm going to toss this to Sarah and Emily for just a second, because talking to the guy who was waving the Confederate flags and then going to the tree, all of that happened on the same day. And Sarah and Emily, why don't you explain how we even got involved in that? I think that was like the fourth day we had been in South Carolina, third or fourth day.
Yeah, I think it was the day we left. The day following that was our last day. I think that's correct. We heard that there were every Sunday, right? That was a Sunday. Every Sunday there were a group of gentlemen that would go and to protect this monument. This monument that's celebrates Confederate soldiers there. And we showed up. Jeff wasn't feeling that well that day, so we said, well, you stay at the hotel. We'll go down, check it out, see if anyone even wants to talk to us. Introduce ourselves and see what it's all about. So we went down there, and to our surprise, they were willing to talk to us and also be quite candid. And
it might have helped that Jeff wasn't with us when we asked, right? We don't know why the flags of the South contingent agreed to talk to us, but it might have been that white people were asking him.
But yeah, we got on the phone with Jeff, and Jeff, dragged himself out of the hotel and came down, even though he wasn't feeling great. And we're really fortunate that he did, because that conversation and Jeff's willingness to engage with this man really speaks volumes about Jeff's character, but also how invasive and illogical this thinking is. And we went, and it made us think a lot about monuments and what's identified and what isn't identified that day, because going from that monument to the lynching tree, where there's nothing, you would never know. And probably most people who live in that area have no idea, outside of the Black community. And it's just, it just says the name of the neighborhood in front of it without anything. There's nothing, there's no name, there's nothing explaining what happened there. It's just lost to history. So, it's what society is choosing is significant, and this is what you should remember, and this is what you should forget. And that was really profound, for all of us. But there's going through this, and even like days like that were hard. Part of what Jeff's doing and what we were all along with Jeff and doing was this belief, this optimism that if you get the truth out in front of people, they can't deny it. And that's maybe not for everybody, but for some people it'll break through, and it's that belief that at least kept us going through a lot of this, was that, well, we just have to capture this and get this out there, because there are people, maybe not this gentleman in front of the statue, but there are people out there who can be reached, and it's worth trying to reach them.
And I will say this about that gentleman. The day before, we had been in the Charleston Slave Mart Museum, and I think there's film of that in the movie. And we had seen these shackles for 3-year-old children. And this man looks me in the eye and says, enslaved people were treated like family. And that's the moment that I almost lost it. But I wasn't there to yell at him. I wasn't there to say, hey, you asshole, or you jerk, you're so stupid. What I was there to do was try and confront him with facts. And my training as a criminal defense lawyer was incredibly helpful, because I've had to cross-examine witnesses who are extremely hostile. And what I've learned is, if you start yelling, it just becomes a yelling match. But if you're quiet, if you're direct, and if you ask fact-based questions, remarkable things can happen. And as we went from No, they didn't do 100% of all those products. And I say 95%. And he's like, well, okay, I guess I got to admit that. And all of these facts he's having to admit. And he didn't like where the conversation was going about the extent to which slave labor was key to building America. So he switched it and said they were treated like family. He went to a different topic. And so my goal was I was going to be polite and respectful for as long as I talked to him. And then people can watch it and make up their own minds about whether he has any credibility whatsoever. And my own personal view is he knew everything he was saying. Pardon my French, was a sack of shit. He knew it, but he just couldn't admit it. And as we walked away, you saw him as we walked away, and I think he felt like that did not go very well. And let me say one last thing, because you talked about the tree. I was very sick in South Carolina, and I am convinced that it had nothing to do with a flu or anything else. It had to do with what we were seeing every day and the history that we were going through. And touching that tree, Sarah and Emily had to say, Jeff, why don't you go up and touch the tree? Because I don't know that I would have gotten that close to it otherwise. And it was a profound moment. But what we have now, preserved on film for generations to come to see, is people knowing what happened there. And it's like Sarah and Emily have said, if you know what happened and you are a person of good faith, it will have an impact. And these impacts that we want to have again and again and again are part of what bring about a change in a community or in a country.
Thank you. I have a follow-up, if that's okay. Just about the monuments in general. One of the things that, I mean, I study this stuff pretty heavily just because I have to, because no one else is going to. But the history of statues are always very weird to me, especially about the memorialization of it, and it's kind of like a worshiping thing in my mind. But one of the things I was learning, like if you go to Germany, Nazis, they don't have Nazi soldiers like there. They don't have not Nazi leaders in monuments or anything, because they were bad people. We can all acknowledge and say that, but there's this strange conviction that people owning slaves in America wasn't bad. And I just don't understand the notion there that it's okay to have these things up and say it's for a different reason, even though we all really know what it's about. But the strange memorialization of white supremacy is right in front of our faces, and it doesn't seem that many people understand like the directness of it or indirectness of it at the same time. Of literally, even we were talking about George Washington in the film, we talked about. I don't think he needs, that either, because we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't, memorialize someone who's done evil or wrongdoings. There's no, so to me, it's just kind of like this idea is very, very weird to me. So when you guys are talking to the man, he was like, he was really just kind of like, whatever, like, I'm going to say what I want to say anyways. It's not that he even took it serious. And I think that, America itself has done itself. I'm going to say for the founders of this country, they've done themselves well, because that mind trick is still there. It's like a mind trick that exists a lot of times, that, we are, like you said, preserving white supremacy in this country, even with the way they wrote the Constitution. It was really cool to see you pointed that out, because I didn't know there was another article amending, the first one. So, like, it was just all this stuff that I had no idea about. And I'm very, very grateful and thankful that you guys did get it on film, like you said, for generations to see. I'm wondering, like, talking about the generational aspect, is there anything that you see today that you say, like, this conversation happening in this moment, in this time, is something that needs to be recorded so it doesn't get, forgotten?
I want to throw this to Sarah and Emily, and then I want to come back to some thought I have about these.
The question is for us about what's not in the film that we
No,
need.
what do we see happening today, I guess, is.
I mean, Brianna, you can rephrase it for us.
Yeah, so like the way that America has rewritten this history or chose to, uphold things that probably shouldn't be upheld. What do you see today that should be, memorialized or monumented that is taking place in this moment in time that we should probably fight for now?
Well, some of those things we tried to document in the film. Some of the places we went, like we went to the Steps to Nowhere in Tulsa, which are now just kind of overgrown platforms with broken steps and disconnected from history. So that's a place that needs to be memorialized. I mean, one of the goals of this film is, we hope, to empower people to be to investigate the history in their own towns and communities across the country, to become citizen historians, because reclaiming history, unearthing history, is a political act, and making new monuments. We need every generation needs to claw through the earth and erect new monuments, and I think that's the. And I'm sorry, it's Brianna's question, and we might have lost her for that. But Brianna, I was just saying that that every generation needs to be empowered to make new monuments, to decide what's important, to reclaim history. And just as Jeff did when he created his talk, he went to primary sources. He looked at not just what we're told in our history books about what happened. He looked at what people actually said in their own words. And it's this kind of work that needs to be done across this country by young people across this country, is reclaiming our history, and not the history of the famous people, the history of the people on whose backs this country was built. Hopefully Marquette students can be a part of that.
And that's one of the reasons why it was so important for us to highlight this story of Commissioner Tammy Sawyer and the work that she's doing on the ground today. I mean, she's now become she's in elected office, but she wasn't always. And she worked to have 2 monuments removed from Memphis. Just an idea that she and some members of her community had. They had a meeting and they set that goal, and they thought that it couldn't happen. But they worked really hard and they did it. And it's that kind of story that we hope provides some inspiration for others to take on these sort of, insurmountable tasks, things that seem totally impossible, but just, believing in the impossible and doing it anyway.
And I will tell you, just to follow up on what Tammy Sawyer did in Memphis, I had seen that monument from the time I was a child. And what I will say is that to have the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue and monument come down in Memphis, Tennessee, is something that I would have bet you would never see, certainly not in my lifetime. And in 2018, I think it was right after the statue came down, I went to Memphis to give a talk, a version of the talk that is the basis of this film. And there were 2 things that were kind of overwhelming. One is that I gave the talk in the main ballroom of the Peabody Hotel in Memphis, which is an iconic Southern hotel. And I thought to myself, if my parents were alive, they would just be laughing, because they would have been sure, despite of all the encouragement they gave me, that if I was ever in the main ballroom of the Peabody Motel, it would be as a wait person. And that was overwhelming to me. And as I drove from the airport to the Peabody Hotel, we went past the place where the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue was. And it was a platform with nothing on top of it, surrounded by a fence. And the emotion that I had in seeing that, I think, is real. And so I'm not trying to be Pollyannish or overly optimistic. This is going to be hard. And I wish I could look at the three of you and say, it's going to get a lot easier, a lot quicker. And I can't say that. It's not. But what I can say is, don't think you're not having an impact. That monument coming down is huge. Doesn't get anybody out of jail, doesn't feed anybody, but it is part of white supremacy starting to crack. And with what you saw on January 6th at the Capitol, if white supremacy is actually starting to crack in America, if it is actually starting to crumble, what did you think it was going to look like? White supremacists just sitting around sipping tea and going, oh, well, our time has come and gone. Isn't that too bad? No, they're going to get, pardon my French, bat fuck crazy. And that's what we saw at the Capitol. And so for me, we are at a tipping point in America, and we have been here for several years. And that's the thing about history. When people think of a tipping point in time, this isn't like 5 minutes. This could be 5 to 15 years that you're at a tipping point, trying to figure out where is this going to go. And we have an opportunity now in America that, in my view, has never happened before in our history. Because, and this is the thing I wanted to say, in the 60s, I was 11 years old when King was assassinated, but I had been watching very, very closely, and my parents were talking to us about everything that was going on. The anti-Vietnam War marches had people of color in them, almost every single march, but they were vastly majority white. And the civil rights marches had white people and other people of color who weren't Black in them, but they were vastly majority Black. The demonstrations that have been going on in America for the past year and a half have included every group, every ethnic group, every group you can imagine in the American population. That has not happened before. And so if you're looking for indications that something different is possible, you need to look for shit that hasn't happened before. That has not happened before. Look at what Stacey Abrams is doing in Georgia. A Black minister from a church gets elected senator in the state of Georgia. That's why people are tearing their hair out with these voter laws. It's not because of voter fraud. It's because of voter turnout. Because if the turnout and motivated voters like that can turn an election in Georgia, what else could they do? So I think we are at an exciting time. And for you, as y'all are entering adulthood and entering this phase of your activism, it is going to be hard. But I just think this is our best chance in American history to go in the right direction on racial justice. And I also think it's our last chance, because if we roll back from here, I don't know what we're rolling back to, and I don't know how long it's going to take to then dig out and get back to where we are right now.
I have a comment. This is something I was thinking when watching the film, and being myself at 23 and 2021, because I like to start in a present moment of where we at. It's May 14th, 2021, right? Because I do see that a lot. When you want to talk to people who don't get your oppression, they play the timeline game. But for me, when I was born in 1998, being Black and Indigenous, I had to learn 2 histories, but at 21. And so I was just frightened that I learned about my history at 21. So it's only been 2 years since I fully know myself as to how far my people came and where we could take them going, right? And so when I think about this timeline, people like to play that. And so I was like, well, as a leader, let's play that same game. Because I started to think about the boarding schools of Catholic and Black students and Indigenous students forced to go to Catholic schools to assimilate to American society, and that was in the 70s. And when we were talking to, high officials at Marquette, I was like, just in the 70s, I wasn't supposed to be on your campus. Let's be real about it. 20 decades before the 70s, you didn't want to talk to me on the street. Let's be real about it. So if we want to play this timeline game, let me play with you the understanding of that the English language is not my language. My people was assimilated to take on English. So the reason why I'm not able to comprehend certain sentence structures or to say big obsolete words is because it's not my language. And until that get into white American head, that everyone has a different way of coming to English, and we could accept that for naturally their way of telling the story, you know? Because I see that when your film does an excellent job at seeing that policies, timelines of when we got on that ship and how that transformation, that ship turned into a car, to factories, and to now our today living, right? And for me, again, it's the language, you know, from then it used to be laws, now it's policies. Now, today, do we ask for policies? That's what's something I think about our generation. We don't ask enough about policies because, you know, when you go to insurance, car insurance, whatnot, it's like, well, it's in a policy. Well, you send that policy to me so I can read it too and let me comprehend it in my way of English. Then you read it in your way of English. Because I believe white Americans don't take accountability and ownership of English as being their primary language, and how oppressive that is to put one person in a box and not allow other people to come in conversation. Because what I see in my generation is that we have to be at a certain level of vocabularies to be in the room, to talk to those people, to act as if we are one of these people. But when the reality is, I could talk to someone on the street and they could tell me about this whole system by the basis of what they're living, than a white man that been as a president for 10 years, living in one zip code, you know, and that surrounding, and how he look at the system, you know? There's gonna be two different views, but one view is gonna be more crucial of where we're going, because as my indigenous teaching shares, that we have to learn from our past. So this can happen for us for 7 generations. You know, everything we did, Bree and Ivelia, we didn't do it just for our generations, get lucky. We did it so that it would be generational for different generations. Because when we go back to Marquette in 2029, will those same infrastructures be there? You know, that's something that we should look at. And just to relate to the monumental thing, it might be controversial and not to disrespect anyone's religion or spirituality, but I do believe that churches should be actually looked at, you know, because when you show that it took slaves and indigenous people to build those churches, and churches have a time point. They'll tell you AD 1845 was when this church was built. That's the Marquette Church, right? Mm-hmm. Again, think about our ancestors at that time, building that church, now allowing access to practice their own spirituality in that. And when do we ask white America to look at their church structure, you know? Because I think we get into a point, and I get fair because a lot of my elders share this with me, that we to a compass where everyone is freed, but we're in this mentality game of, I'm just scared to make someone else uncomfortable. And I think when we get to a point where we stop allowing white America be the morality of where we go to, because again, I could speak the same language as you are, but once we start stepping out of racism as an English language, because everybody got the English word for racism down, right? But we haven't found languages outside of English to call out racism. And that's when I start to see that white America would step out their box to start seeing that racism doesn't always involve them, it involves everyone else, but it takes the spots to step out of something that you were so used to. Because I've only been around whiteness for my college experience. Before then, I never had to experience that. And so my question is, from what I shared, how does this help us with, like you said, the phone, social media? How do that help us challenge the ideology of Black Twitter, Black consciousness on this realm? You know, because I see a lot of us go there, post there first, and have the conversation at home about how racism is affecting me as a person of color in America.
You know, I just think there's so much that you said there that is just so profound. And I will tell you that some of America's greatest white authors have recognized what you said. William Faulkner wrote about Ernest Hemingway. He has never written a word that would send a reader to the dictionary. Hemingway's response was, "Poor Faulkner. Does he think it takes big words to express big thoughts?" And so just as you say, the way that you express yourself and try and talk about these things has been dominated by the American culture. And one of the things we tried to point out in the movie, if you say racism, Most Americans equate that with prejudice. And they're not the same thing. Prejudice is much, much, much less than racism. But if you think it's only prejudice, then that allows people to say, well, I've cleared my heart of any prejudice. I don't see color. I love everybody. So we don't have any problems. Let's go for it. And we don't have to do anything. So it's that kind of thinking that allows us to move forward in a way where we don't address these things. But we are at a moment of reckoning. And I think there has never been a time in history where our community has stood up and said, it ain't going to happen like this anymore. We have stood up and had resistance throughout all of our history. But I'll just give you a quick example. Many people say, and I understand it, King said it himself, the gains at the 60s were kind of at bargain rates, so to speak. So integrating lunch counters and public accommodations, that didn't cost America anything. But I will tell you, I remember the look on my parents' faces the first time they took us into what had been an all-white restaurant, and we sat down and got served dinner. Sounds really simple. What's the big deal? For them, it was transformational. People need to remember and understand that for 90 years after the Civil War, the law in America was separate but equal for 90 years after the Civil War. So what was maybe a minor change in our eyes was a profound change in my parents' eyes. From 1955 to 1968, Black America took steps forward that were unprecedented. And quite frankly, we were at a tipping point then. And I think that's part of the reason King got shot. And part of the reason what came next was Richard Nixon and the war on drugs, because our community was moving in a way that had never happened before. And so we're at another point this time. We are better armed this time, because I guarantee you, there were few of us at y'all's age that we're thinking about and dealing with these issues the way you are. I didn't learn the stuff in that movie when I was 23 years old. I knew a lot of it before I made this film, but there was a lot that I learned in my 50s, despite having gone to Marquette University, despite having gone to Harvard Law School. And since y'all have gone to Marquette University, you know how I didn't learn it there, because you know it wasn't taught there. It wasn't taught anywhere. And I will say, I got mad at my teachers at one point. I was furious at myself at first for not knowing this. And then I got mad at my teachers. And then I thought, how can my teachers teach me something that they were never taught themselves? And that's why I think this issue of reclaiming and redefining and correcting our history is just so important. And it's the thing that has never been done as the foundation of trying to move forward on racial justice. It's why we pass laws telling police you can't choke somebody and think that's going to solve the problem. That's not going to solve the problem. It's why implicit bias training hasn't changed policing in America. It's going to take more than that. But I think that now with this history, if you're looking at this history and saying, okay, we have this problem in 2021, how do we address it? If you understand the history that brought you to that problem, you're going to understand, wow, that needs a remedy that's a lot more profound than just a Band-Aid. And so hopefully by spreading this history, we start to spread in the ideas in the minds of people, this is what we're up against. And so the solutions are going to have to be profound.
Thank you guys. Oh yeah. So we have a question about, you know, kind of the, I guess, emergence, I'll say the emergence of Black trauma on TV, on screens, you know, kind of taking Black people through the same turmoil once again. Like, I don't know, at some points I get a little upset, you know, watching it. I don't really engage in too much of it when I see it's done for like monetary goals and not for, you know, with historical context. What do you guys think of the emergence of it and how it is now becoming to shape media almost. It's becoming a genre, if you can say, like, of consistently seeing, Black people in tumultuous situations for entertainment. Do you think that it is helpful, or do you guys think that it's getting to be to a point where there needs to be more education that comes with it, and not just throwing on the screen for people to, look at as if it's a TV show?
Well, I'd like to, I think Jeff should answer this question, but I'd like to frame it kind of how, because we thought a lot about that in the making of this film, and Jeff thinks a lot about that every time he gives his talk. And it's, what is our responsibility when we put forward like the lynching images that we put forward in the film, or we put forward the snuff images of, the snuff films, the murder of Black people, right? Is that a responsible thing we're doing with this film? Are these images we should be sharing? And I do want to give that to Jeff, because I think it's a question he's thought a lot about.
I have thought constantly about this. I started researching this stuff at the end of 2011. So this is like 10 years that I've been immersed in this, and it has taken a toll. There's no question about it. On my spirit, on my soul. William Burroughs, a very famous author, wrote a book called Naked Lunch, a book about drug addiction, about all kinds of bizarre stuff. Very difficult book to read. He was asked, what does the title mean, Naked Lunch? And what he said is, it's that moment when everyone has to look at what is really on the end of their fork. We have a 400-year laboratory experiment of what will happen regarding racial justice in America if we don't reckon with the truth about our past. Because we've never reckoned with it. We have never faced it. We have always suppressed it. And when people say, oh, it's too hard to look at, and now I'm not talking about Black people. So let me separate Black people out of this for a minute. Because I've had white people say to me, it's too hard to look at, it makes me so depressed, it's really difficult. And it's like, so if you're afraid to reckon with this, what you're saying to us Black people is just live with it the way it is. Because we got 400 years to demonstrate that if we don't confront this, what's going to happen? Take a look around in 2021. This is what's going to happen. And so I see no other way. And believe me, it's like, because I talked about this with Sarah and Emily, and we talked about, some people call it like racial justice porn, because it's so difficult to look at and so horrific. And it's like, I'm not looking to make this easy for America, because that's what we've tried to do for the last 400 years. I don't want to make any white people upset. I don't want to make anybody emotionally in a difficult position. Let's just talk about coming together and hugging and going together as one. And if we do that, then our people are going to be where we are or worse for the next 200 years. And so for many Black people, I would say, if you're going to watch this film, you need to prepare yourself. For many of us, it's not, I know this stuff. I know all the facts, because quite frankly, hardly any Black people in America have been taught these facts. For many Black people, it's that I know this stuff in my bones, in my soul, because I know we live it. I don't have to be convinced of this. And that's where it's important to remember, we are 13% of the people in this country. That means that 87% of the people don't have our lived experience. And they have ignored these facts for so long that they are comfortable looking at where our community is and saying, well, yeah, that's too bad. Hope nothing bad happens. And if George Floyd happens, yeah, I'm going to get upset. But don't you dare break any windows. Don't you dare get in the street and make me uncomfortable in my home. And so I feel like we have been desperate to avoid reckoning with our past in some ways, because I think for some white people, it's like, my God, if we reckon with this, are the Black people going to do to us what we did to them? If all of this is true, what do we deserve? And that's why it's so important to understand this is not about punishing anybody. This is not about getting in anybody's face. This is about saying we can actually do better. And only by acknowledging exactly how we got here do we have a chance to get to a different place going forward. So I would say to America, I know this is really difficult, but take a minute, take a deep breath. If you've got to watch it 3 different times because you start and stop, then do that. But if you say that you can't deal with this information, that it is too difficult for you to deal with, what you're saying is, I would rather Black people live the way they're living than for me to have to confront this information. And I can't sign on to that.
And we followed Jeff's lead with what to include and what not to include in this film. And we included some hard stuff, and it was important to Jeff that the lynching photos and the photos of Black and brown people being killed by law enforcement be included in the film. But we made choices on how to include it. And they may seem like subtle choices, but they were important to all of us. We didn't show anyone being killed. We showed the moments of anticipation leading up to it, because everybody knows what happens. And we didn't have to show that, and we didn't want to show that, and we didn't want to traumatize anyone by showing that. So we showed the story before it happened, which is, just as effective, if not even more haunting, because you know where it's going.
Right.
And with the photos of lynching, these are photos that were postcards, that were calendars, that were shared, in celebration of horrible acts. So we didn't want to show them the way they'd been shown before. So in all the lynching photos we showed, we focused on the white audiences. So you'll see the faces of the people watching. You won't see the bodies of the people.
And that is so much of the story, Emily, is that the people sitting there watching, being photographed and knowing that they would face no consequences. Nobody was going to look at those pictures and say, we got to go out and arrest those folks. They knew they were going to be okay. And I just have to add, Sarah and Emily have been very kind. And I mean, they're right. I did this work. I did this research. I don't own this research. Anybody can find this research, but I did this work to put this together. This was a PowerPoint presentation. And it was my second job for 10 years, because I had my day job and then I was researching this stuff as my second job, because, to tell the truth, I kind of got obsessed with it. I was learning stuff I hadn't seen before, and I kept digging deeper and deeper and finding more. It took a huge amount of trust for me to turn this over to Sarah and Emily, because I had put so much of my life into it. But it was because of the way they came to this project, and it was because of the demonstration in their life to anti-racist work, and because of who they were and how they dealt with me, that I had that trust. And this may be my work, but I think this film is brilliant, and I'm not a filmmaker. That's Sarah and Emily, and I will forever be grateful to them for going on this project with me, because I think their filmmaking and my work, putting that together, we came up with something that's bigger than the 3 of us.
Thank you. Thank you guys for that. I will say, in terms of the question, sorry, I think it was Ernie asked, I am personally not a fan of the entertainment process of displaying Black trauma, but I know documentaries and stuff are needed. That's how I do it. That's just me, because I didn't really pick up reading a lot until maybe about a year and a half ago. I started reading more intensely. I got a lot of my information from documentaries, watching interviews and stuff like that. So I do think that is needed. But as far as the movies and like
Right.
the fun stuff of it, like kind of like, oh, let's go to the movies and go see someone get killed by the police. That's not. I'm not a fan of that at all. I don't think
Right.
anyone is.
And
But
I
I
think, can
think
I
we,
say something about that? Because what you're
yeah,
saying is really important. And I think a huge majority of Americans first heard of the Tulsa massacre from Watchmen on HBO. You know, a fantasy TV series about superheroes. And on the one hand, I am glad that people are finding out about Tulsa. On the other hand, I would find it very, with those kind of shows, my feeling is, what am I going to learn from this? Because I don't need to understand the experience of the trauma. I don't need to understand what it's like when you think your relatives are getting killed. I don't need to understand that, because all of us in our community understand that. And so I do have the feeling, if I'm going to watch something, am I going to learn something from it? And if it's just kind of beautiful acting and nice photography, it's like, yeah, I got better things to do. That's just my
yeah,
feeling about it.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And for me, because that's a great question in the comments, and what we just digested. Because for me personally, from elders, because primary sources carry so much weight, because it's so much lived experience of a time of, again, seeing it bluntly and now seeing it covertly, you know, where we hide it. And again, like I said, being 23, born in the late 90s, I was born into this world to know that these are the stories that my people come from, you know, and I think that's not much digested by a lot of people, because it's like, you're only born to know what your placement is, but you're born to know that your people been in so much traumatic stress and so much trauma that today, you guys do a well job with the colors and pictures, because I think that's so critical to see that there are color. We are colored people at that time, you know, because I think that's where we get scary, when color washed away and we start to see a different time point or a long extension of time period. But to even focus on it, you talk about reparation, and for me personally, I think the reparation today is for Black people in America to get that healing space, because you say that 90 years of segregation, so that tells us enough that that was 90 years allowing us to be ourselves, to think ourselves, to operate ourselves. But today's time, it's about mental health. It's always some type of white insertion or white American pinpoint of mental health for Black people. But when do we come into conversation saying that, well, after watching this film, like today is a great example, we get to talk about it. You know, a lot of Black people in America watching films on Facebook have no space, have no community besides who they share and who they share off of. And I think that's what probably get more traumatized for people who absorb this this well-being of knowledge, you know, because we don't know we only see these videos for 30 seconds, sometimes 2 minutes, sometimes 5 minutes. We never know how it started. We don't know how it fully ends. And so for today, seeing how this film played out, you gave us a lot of information to say that this is a template for a lot of us. Even if you guys, you know, might not see it today, but I could see this film being very powerful in the next generation and after, because again, seeing that we in color and seeing that these are things that, if it had to make somebody uncomfortable, I think, especially as Black children in America today, is their generational rights to know what happened before they came into this world. Because if we didn't know that, we wouldn't be able to move or act accordingly how we are today in this present time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think he makes a really good point with that. One of the things that really stood out to me was when you took the picture of the lynching. I've seen the picture thousands of times, but and you like separated it, and they're like, I thought they were at a party. I really thought like there were people at a party, and then you bring it back together, and I'm like, wow, like I've seen this picture 1,000 times, but never in that point of view. So I think that what Sir said was really important.
And I think, you know, Sarah and Emily were talking about focusing on those people instead of on the, you know, the damaged bodies of our ancestors that were being killed. And in some of those photographs, you see young children with smiles on their faces. And that tells you something about what was being taught and what was being passed on. And I know people are probably going to say that we're coming up against time, but I just want to emphasize again that the depth with which the three of our Marquette partners are talking about these subjects is so encouraging, because this is, again, my dad is like, look for stuff that hasn't happened before. And there were people in my generation that were activists and trying to do the same kinds of things. But I think that your depth of understanding is at a different place. And that's why, you know, people say each generation hopefully can do better than the next one. And so y'all are better armed at 23 or 22 or 21 than we were. And that means that y'all are going to have an opportunity to do more than we did. And this is still our responsibility. I said I'm about to turn 65, but I'm healthy and I got a lot of time left in this work. So I'm not going anywhere. But I remain committed and excited because I actually believe America can go to a different place. And remember, we're going to hear a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling, a lot of people that say this movie cannot be shown in schools because it is divisive. With all of these laws that are being considered around the country, this movie would be banned under some of those laws. And that just encourages me even more, because as I said earlier, when white supremacists get desperate, the desperation starts to show. And if they're getting desperate, it means they themselves see the cracks forming. And that just delights me. So should we call Dante back? I think we're getting messages saying, y'all got to get out of here.
Well, I think that was a powerful way to conclude this conversation. Really found it engaging, really found it inspiring, and really found it urgent. So to Brianna Flowers, Ivelia Guerrero, Sir Lawrence Tinder, our Marquette EOP student leaders, thank you so much for your contributions today and for everything that you've done throughout your time at Marquette. And look forward to seeing what major things you do now that you all will be graduating. So really appreciate you being here. And to Emily Kunstler, Sarah Kunstler, and Jeffery Robinson, thank you so much for making this film. Thank you for making it available for the 2021 Milwaukee Film Festival. And thank you for the work that you do overall. It really means a lot. And you can see who we are, a chronicle of racism in America, now, meaning right after we go off air, through May 20th at 11 up until 11:59 p.m. All you got to do is go to mkefilm.org/festival and check the film out. And if there's people who you know who weren't able to tune into this conversation live, this will be archived on the Milwaukee Film YouTube channel. Please circulate it widely, and also encourage them to see the film while it is available through our festival. Thank you once again to our panelists. Thank you all for tuning in live. And I encourage you to enjoy the 2021 Milwaukee Film Festival. Take care.
Thank you. Can I just say to the three Marquette students, please make sure I get your email addresses in some way, because I don't want to let these connections go. Thank you all very much.